Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today. I have another long doozy of a video right after my Fandom Friday, which was also a long video. But I wanted to show more projects that I use with the Spellbinders September 2024 club products. Here's a refresher on the card that I made during the live earlier this month. I used the stitching, the embossing, and the stencil of the month. I also started coloring the clear stamp of the month images with watercolors, so I'm going to continue that today. I also have the wax seal and the autumn mix. I have the glimmer foil, and I was given the rose gold foil along with that set. I have the standard die of the month as well as the large die of the month. I also have the little caboodle die, which I think is my favorite thing ever. This little frog is so stinking adorable. I have the BetterPressed plates of the month, which are also foilable. So if you have both systems, this is a great club to get. And then I have the 3D embossing folder. So I'm not going to do any more stitching or stenciling this month. I'm going to focus on the rest of the products within the different clubs. So I'm just going to quickly go through the rest of my watercoloring here. If you want to see how I started watercoloring these, you can check out my live, which will be up in the upper right hand corner right here. So if you want to watch that video later and catch the replay of our live from earlier this month, you could see how I started watercoloring these images. So I'm just going to do some last little touch-ups here. I'm adding some brown leaves, the acorns, and then green leaves to finish up the coloring. I did really simple watercoloring. I just have water on my glass board. I get my brush wet. I add the water to the watercolor pencil and then pick up the ink as I am, wetting the pencil. Once I'm all done watercoloring, I'll go ahead and let this dry for a little bit while I pick up my watercolors and put them away. I'm going to grab the coordinating dies. So I'm going to use the two ones that cut out the images. Again, making sure that my watercolored images are dry before die cutting them out. I did stamp with VersaFine Clair in Pinecone and embossed it with clear embossing powder. And I did this on watercolor cardstock. I'm going to use the large thanks sentiment from the Glimmer Hot Foil Club. So I'm going to grab the rose gold. I actually switched this out for a roll that I already had opened. I've got a lot of foil. I love foiling. So I'm going to use what I already have open, and I'm using my little tool here to cut the foil down. So just lining up those ruler areas where it helps you just cut a nice straight line to cut around the thanks. Once that's done, I'll trim down a piece of brown cardstock. I thought the pink would look really nice on brown and match the colors. The rose gold foil does match the kind of more mahogany looking tones I have in my images. It feels like it's the same color, just like different shades, if I'm saying my color theory correctly. So I think it's going to look really nice on the darker brown cardstock. So I'll go ahead and get that going on my Glimmer Hot foil off camera and start working on my background while that is warming up. And I'm going to run it through my Platinum 6 once the plate is ready. I'm going to trim an A2 piece of this alabaster cardstock. I started with A2, but the more I was looking at it and how everything was going to fit, I felt like it was a little too big. I wanted to trim it down a bit. So I'm going to trim it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 so I can have a little bit of a border around my panel. Before I do anything more to the background, I wanted to give it a little bit of distress. So I'm grabbing Vintage Photo Distress ink and a blending brush, and I'm going to just bring that color in off the edges and around all 4 sides. Just give it kind of a vignette look, just darkening the edges. And then I have my spritz in walnut stain. I'm going to give it a good shake and then use the straw on the inside to help splatter that onto that background. I'll go ahead and wait for that to dry. I'll also clean up my desk, and right now my foiling is done. So here is how that turned out. It looks so good. I love the pink on the brown. It just looks so pretty. it really gives a nice shine, and I like the contrast. I think it looks nice. So I'll use the coordinating die to cut that out, and I'll start working on the layout. So I know that I want my images to be glued down to the panel, but I wanted to pop up my thanks. So I'm going to cut out a few more of those. And then I also thought that the background felt a little, I don't want to say plain because it's not plain, but I wanted a little more. So after I'm done gluing these 3 layers of the thanks together, I'm going to grab the standard embossing folder of the month. So not the 3D one, but the other one. It has a really fun kind of hound, I don't know if it's houndstooth, I don't know the right word, but it has a really nice pattern to it. You can tell me the pattern down below in the comments if you'd like, but it has a really cool texture to it. And I just know that embossing this panel, even though it has distress ink and splatter, you need a little more, and it really helps just give it a little bit more interest and fun. So I'll go ahead and run that through my Spellbinders Platinum 6, and then I can start assembling this card panel together. So I'm going to just glue these images down because I want to glue down my thanks sentiment. I don't really need any dimension. I think there's a lot going on in the images that they don't need as much dimension because they're already really well layered. So I'm putting my pumpkins and flowers and leaves in the bottom left-hand corner, and then I'll put my acorns and leaves in the top right-hand corner. I like that it kind of frames out the panel. And then I'll add liquid adhesive to the back of my thanks sentiment and get that glued down a little bit towards the top. So I'm only going to cover a bit of each of the images. I didn't want to cover the pumpkin. So it's going to be a little higher up where the 2 images kind of overlap in the area in the middle. And it's going to take a little time to dry, so I'm going to put my Misty on there. I actually walked away for a little bit and came back. It still needed a little bit of pressure, so I'll keep pressing that down while I get a card base ready. So this is a top folding A2 card base out of some sturdy white cardstock. It's my go-to for my card bases. But as I was looking at it, I didn't really like the white around the card front. I felt like it needed to be darkened up a little. Now looking back, I could have just inked the edges instead of using pattern or cardstock, but that's fine. I have a dark piece of cardstock, the same cardstock that I did my foiling on, so it will coordinate perfectly. I'm going to add my adhesive to this panel, and then I will add it to the card front. And then I'll go ahead and adhere my thanks card panel to the front of the card base. Again, just using some sturdy adhesive to glue that down. I'm centering it so there is the same amount of brown cardstock peeking out around the edges. I wanted to add just a little bit more, so I'm going to grab some gems, and I end up choosing I think this is the gold mix, and no, the peach blush. So I guess I'm bringing in more of that pinkiness. It matches the foil, fairly well as the colored in images that I watercolored. So I'm going to put 3 in the upper left-hand corner and 2 kind of more in the thanks, like around that S area, just to add a little bit more shine and dimension and interest to the card. That's going to finish off my first card. This says watercoloring my clear stamp of the month and coordinating die, as well as the embossing folder and the glimmer hot foil kit of the month. I love the pink and the brown with the more neutral tones. Jumping right into my next card, I'm going to use the wax seal of the month. So I have my electric wax warmer, which I got from Amazon. This was my first time using it, and I really liked it. So I have it linked down below in my description box of my supplies, as well as on my Amazon storefront. So you can find those links down below. I am going to use the die of the month. I'm going to do the sunflowers and kind of make a bouquet is what I'm envisioning in my head at this time. And I'm going to use just the yellow and the green wax beads from the autumn mix. So I'll go ahead and get those ready. I put 6. I think I could have gotten away with maybe 5 wax beads. I'm still really, really new to wax seals. I've only done it a couple times. So I'm excited that I have this electric warmer to push me a little bit more to use the wax seals that I have. And this is a little silicone mat. Again, I got it on Amazon. You can use any silicone mat you have in your stash. And then I have this cute little spatula that I got. It's silicone so the wax doesn't stick to it. And I'm using it to just make sure that my wax beads are melting. And it also helps me clean up later. So I'm going to pour my wax onto the silicone mat, and then I placed my seal, kind of swishing it around, making sure the wax comes out of all the edges of my wax seal. And you can see I have quite a bit of wax left, not a lot. Maybe 6 is a good number if you don't mind having some extra, but I think I could have gotten away with 5. So I'm going to let that cool down. Once the wax seal can lift up on its own, it's ready, and I'm going to try to clean up my mess here. I'm still learning how to clean this thing properly. But I found that if I kind of bunch it up on the inside, once it cools down, I can peel it out of the wax spoon. So you'll see that here in just a minute. Yeah, again, scooping it up. I thought I did it later, but I'm scooping it up and letting it sit there while it's still kind of warm. And then when it's completely cooled down, you'll see I'm able to just pull it out of the spoon. So right now I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life. I want to, put my wax stuff out of the way, but make sure my wax seal stays just fine. So I'm finally, pushed it out of the way a bit. And here's a close-up look at how this wax seal turned out. I love the leaves and I really like it on the green and yellow together. I think this turned out really nice. So now I'm going to move into die cutting. I'm grabbing lots of cardstock from my scrap stash. I don't know the names of all the colors, so I did my very best to put in my supply list all of the different colors that I think that I use from Spellbinders. A lot of these scraps are from the Weekender kit, so I'm doing my best. But use what you have in your stash. No need to run out and buy colored cardstock unless you're all out of a color. So I die cut 3 sunflowers, like 3 of everything, 3 of the yellow petals, 3 of the brown centers, 3 of the stems, and 6 of the leaves because they cut out a stem and 2 leaves. So I have those ready to go. I glued the center of my sunflowers together, and then I took a half sheet of alabaster cardstock and I sprayed it with my little water spritzer and ran that through my Platinum 6 with the 3D embossing folder. And I sprayed it because the 3D really presses into the paper and I didn't want anything to tear, and the water just helps make the paper a little more pliable when I'm running it through my machine. So I trimmed this panel again to 4 by 5.25. I will end up trimming it down a little later and you'll see why when I get there. But I want to create a sentiment for my card. So now that things are cooling down, you can see here, I could just pull that wax right out of the spoon. So easy peasy. The bottom wasn't quite as much, but the bulk of what I got, I was able to pull out of the spoon. And I'm going to move that off to the side so I have some space, and I'm going to emboss a sentiment. I'm going to emboss from the clear stamp of the month, and I'm going to use the coordinating strip die cut to cut it out. I'm going to use that same brown cardstock that I did the center of the sunflowers, and I'm going to emboss it in gold. So I'm going to use my clear embossing ink and then use a detail gold embossing powder. I just thought it would match with the overall kind of colors and vibe of the card and how it's turning out so far. So I'm going to tell you that I accidentally bumped my camera. I figured out in my last Fandom Friday video that when I pull out my heat gun, the cord of my heat gun also pulls on the cord of my camera charger. And when it pulls on the cord of my camera charger, my camera stand moves. So I apologize. I'm about to go sideways here in just a minute, and I won't realize it until the next time I stand up. I'm going to do my best to figure out how to avoid that from happening in the future now that I figured it out. So hopefully my camera won't go so sideways in the future. But here you can see I'm adding that gold embossing powder to my stamped sentiment. I did use an anti-static powder before I applied the powder, or before I stamped and applied the powder. So that way I knew only my stamped sentiment would turn gold. So I'm gonna let that cool down while I grab the coordinating die. And once it's cooled down, I'm using a Swiffer cloth just to help pick up that extra powder. And I ran that through my die cutting machine. So now I have the sentiment strip, A Harvest of Love, which I thought went perfectly with my Harvest of Sunflowers. So I ended up not adding anything to this panel. Looking back, I kind of wish I would have maybe done a little bit of splatter or something fun on it, but that's okay. I think it looks really nice. If you're not into splatter, then this card will be for you. So I know that I want to arrange my sunflowers so they look like a little bouquet. So here I am just kind of figuring out placement. Am I liking how things are going? Are my stems going to be long enough? So I'm going to go ahead and glue my sunflowers to one end of each stem. I like that there's two like little circles to glue the flowers on. So depending on which way you want your stem to curve, you can glue the flower to the appropriate end. Now, I didn't like that my flowers' stems like disappeared behind my wax seal, so I'm going to do a little bit of surgery on my die cuts. I'm going to trim the other end, that little circle on the other end, so that way it looks like a continuous stem. So I'm trimming off some half circles off the sides. I want that stem to be longer. And then when I layer everything down, I'm going to see where my stem starts to hide behind the wax seal. And I'm actually going to cut my stems and I'm going to lower the little tiny pieces that I'm going to cut off here in just a second so they come out on the other end of the wax seal. So you can see right now only one stem goes through. That's not long enough for what I want. So I'm going to figure out that, yes, I need to cut these stems down. So I'm going to cut all of them. Again, I know approximately where they're going to hide behind my wax seal, so I can get those sunflowers now attached. I'm going to use just foam adhesive behind my flowers. I'm not going to add any glue to the stems because I'm going to glue the wax seal on top of them, and I don't need to add any extra glue behind those stems because they will be glued down underneath the wax seal. So I'll go ahead and add all three of my flowers, and I'm going to accidentally make my flower bouquet a little off-centered. So that's why later on I'm going to trim my panel a bit more because I don't like how off-centered they look on the card, and I didn't want to peel everything off and try again. So here you can see I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the only stem that I didn't trim. And then I'm going to glue down those two little stem pieces so they kind of match up with the one sunflower that I didn't trim down. So you can see there's a little break in the stems, but you won't see that when the wax seal is covering it. So I'm making my stems a little longer. Could I have just cut down some green paper? Yes, but I was thinking on my feet here, and that's how I solved my stem problem. So for the wax seal, I ended up deciding I adhered it down with just some tape, like double-sided adhesive tape, but I didn't like it. I wanted to be able to tuck some more things behind it, so I brought in my 1mm foam adhesive and attached it that way instead. And I'm gluing down these first couple leaves with some liquid adhesive, and then the other leaves that you see I'm putting in, the one I just did, the one I just did again, and this one, they're all added with foam adhesive. I have one more leaf because I did die cut 6, so I thought I would just shove that last leaf little in there with some foam adhesive as well. So there's a little bit of mix of glued down leaves and popped up leaves. Here, this is where I embraced that I was going to trim my panel, so I made sure the wax seal looked centered to my flower bouquet, and I'm going to trim off a 1/4 inch again from the right side and the bottom of my panel, so my bouquet looked much more centered. I'm going to add that same 1mm foam adhesive behind my sentiment strip and attach that underneath the bouquet so everything on the card front or this card panel will look centered. That kind of finishes what I'm going for. So I'm going to add a few gems for fun. This time I'm using the gold mix, and I'm going to add a few just around the bouquet, add some shine and interest. Like I said, I wish I would have done some splatter before I glued everything down, but these gems are giving that splatter feel just by putting them randomly around the bouquet. With that, I'm going to clean up my desk and I'm going to get my card base ready. I have a top folding A2 card base again, my favorite. That's all that I make here. And I'm going to look at how the panel looks on the card. And I just felt like it needed a little more oomph, like it needed a little something. So I thought, why don't I round the corners? So I'm grabbing my corner chomper and I'm using the 1/2 inch side. And I was going to do all 4 corners, but then I thought, what if I just did like opposite corners? So I'm going to do the same thing on my card base. And if I don't like it, I can go in and do the other corners. But I really liked it. I liked how it looked, kind of like diagonally, if that makes sense. I love my terms here. I just make it up as I go. But I really liked how they looked with just the opposite corners being rounded and the other opposite corners not being rounded. So that's going to finish off my card. This is when I realized my camera was sideways, so I straightened it, and here is a close-up look. Again, I used the wax seal of the month, the clear stamp set and die of the month, the regular die of the month, and the 3D embossing folder of the month for this Harvest of Love card. Now we're going to jump into my third card, which is going to be the BetterPressed of the month. At least that's what I'm starting with. And I love that this comes with a registration plate. So if you want to equally space out all of your leaves to create a background, you can do that. And I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'll go ahead and grab the registration plate and I'm going to attach it to my magnet sheet or the magnetic side of my BetterPressed system with some repositionable tape, low tack tape. That's what I was looking for, low tack tape. So that will be in place. And what I do love is that you absolutely don't have to do this. You can create any type of pattern you want or just use some of the leaves, but I wanted to create a background for my card, so I'm just going to follow the registration mark. So I'm going to start with the black registration mark leaves. And I'm pulling 3 different BetterPressed ink colors. I'm going to be doing Garnet, Tuscan, and Bark. So very, warm tones. Again, very fall, very warm, very demure. So I'm going to start with Bark, and I'm going to use that for all of the black registration plates. So I'm in a circular motion adding the ink. I wish I would have gone back and done another application of the ink, because by the time I get this through my machine, it's going to be not quite as vibrant, but that's okay. I have an A2 piece of bisque cotton cardstock from Spellbinders, and I attached it to the top plate. So I'm creating my BetterPressed sandwich, and I'll go ahead and run that through my Platinum 6 machine. Again, I use that low tack tape to keep my cotton cardstock in place while I run that through. And there you can see my first set of leaves. I went ahead and cleaned those off, put them away, and I'm adding in the pink registration marks with the next set of leaves, and this time I'm using that Tuscan color, and I really put that ink on there. So I'm going to get a much more vibrant impression. I love it. So pretty. And then finally, for the green set of leaves, I'm using that garnet color, so it has a really fun pink mix to the brown and yellow. And I just love this color combination. It feels so pretty and so fun. So I thought I would use one of the sentiments from the BetterPressed kit of the month, but I'm going to foil it because you can foil your BetterPressed plates. Now, you are not recommended to BetterPress your foiling plates because they're a little bit thicker than the BetterPress plates, but you can foil them. I just add an extra shim to my sandwich when I foil with a BetterPress plate because it is a little bit thinner than the foil plates. So I'm going to use that same dark brown cardstock that I've been using so far in all of these cards, and I'm going to trim down another piece of rose gold foil. Again, this is the foil that I received with the Glimmer Kit of the month, and I also just really like the rose gold color. I think it's going to match really well with the BetterPressed inks that I've chosen for my background. So I brought out my little trimming tool set again to cut a little sliver of that rose gold foil, and I'll go ahead and get that going on my Glimmer Hot Foil machine. And when I'm done, I'm going to use that coordinating strip die to cut around my sentiment. Next, I'm going to do a lot of die cutting. This time I'm using I keep calling it the regular, the non-large die set of the month. And I'm just going to cut out my Scarecrow, and I'm going to make her cute and girly in pink. So I'm going to use, like I said, a lot of this is scraps. So I did link down below what I believe all of these cardstock pieces are, but I'm going to go ahead and do all of that die cutting off camera. And now I'll show you how I assembled this cute little Scarecrow. So I'm going to start with her adorable denim overalls, and I'm going to attach them to her long sleeve pink shirt. You definitely can add much more glue than I did because the shirt is long, but I went ahead and put those together. I also like that the shirt could have been used on its own, or maybe you could have layered it on top of the pants of the overalls to give her like a long sleeve and jeans look. And then I added the little feet that are coming out. I guess it's not feet, it's probably straw, but they look like her feet. And I added her little pocket on her overalls. This is just so dang cute. I think the overalls are probably my favorite of the whole die set. I did die cut out the little bandana out of some yellow cardstock that also matches the yellow of her hair. For her face, I'm adding a piece of that low tack tape. I did glue it to the back of my Scarecrow face, and I'm using a black pen to color in the eyes, and I'm using a brown pen, well, it's an alcohol marker, to color in the nose. So I'm using the same pieces that cut out from the face, and I'm just going to glue them right back in using that repositionable low tack tape as like the backing of my face. So I'll go ahead and get all three of those pieces put back in, and then I'll glue her cheeks, which I did out of some glitter cardstock. Looking back, I wish I would have also done the flower out of the glitter cardstock. I just think that pink was so pretty. I wish I had more of it on the card. I glued the head to the overall outfit, and I'm assembling the flower together to add that to her hat. And then I'll go ahead and put her hat onto her head. And finally, I'll glue the straw hands in place. This is so cute. I think this would be fun for like a fandom card, making the Scarecrow like from the Wizard of Oz. I think that'd be really fun, but she looks pretty cute in her pink and denim. I'm gluing it onto the stand for the Scarecrow, and that is how I assembled my little Scarecrow together. So now that she's done, my sentiment is done, I want to work on putting my card together. I have a very busy background with a very busy Scarecrow on the front, so I'm going to grab some vellum and a die set to add a little bit of fun and interest to this card. I'm using the fluted rectangles from the fluted classic rectangles, and the large detail die is perfect for A2 size panels, so I have that ready to go. And then I'm going to choose one of the rectangle dies to cut out vellum to help just create like a layer in between my two busies, my busy background and my busy foreground. I love doing this with vellum. It just adds like a little bit of space in between the two busies without hiding any of the background. So I'll go ahead and glue my Scarecrow onto the vellum. I'm just going to use liquid adhesive, and I'm doing this first because I need to know where I want to add my foam adhesive on the back side of my vellum, but I want it to be hidden. So I want to make sure that I know exactly where my Scarecrow is going to go before I add that foam adhesive. So I'll go ahead and center her on this vellum panel. Once the panel is ready, I'm going to grab my foam strips, and I'm going to apply my thin little foam strips. These are 1/8 of an inch wide from scrapbook.com, and I'm going to add them behind my Scarecrow where you can't see it. So I'm going to follow the post of my Scarecrow, and I'll also add some foam adhesive behind the little legs and head, just making sure that wherever I add the foam, it won't be seen on the other side of the vellum. Go ahead and peel off all of the release paper, and then I'm going to center this onto my background panel. So I'll use my grid to the best of my ability and get my little Scarecrow centered onto that panel. From there, I'm going to remember that I wanted to overlap my sentiment, so I needed some foam adhesive on the back of the vellum where my sentiment strip's going to go. So I'll go ahead and get that foam strip again, and I'm just going to tuck in a couple small pieces behind the vellum where I know it will be hidden by my sentiment strip. Again, just giving the vellum a little bit more stability and adhering it to the card. So here you can see I'm just going to tuck in the vellum, or under the vellum, the foam strips, and then I'll go ahead and add another foam strip behind my sentiment because I really wanted it to pop off the card. So I'll add that and then attach it to the card front. That's going to finish most of the assembly of my card. So I'll go ahead and grab some gems because that's what I'm doing for these cards, is adding gems. And I'm going to use the gold mix again and add some of those gold gems around the card. This time I'm going to use the more like opaque looking ones, translucent, than the more solid gold gems. So I'm just adding a few. I really like these little tiny ones. They add a lot of shine for how small they are. So I added a couple of those as well. I have another top folding A2 card base, again, how I like to make my cards. And I'll go ahead and put my adhesive on the card base and attach this card front. I really like how this turned out on the color combination. It feels very fall, but also a little bit non-traditional with that pink. But I hope that you liked how I took the Scarecrow and added it with the BetterPressed plate of the month, and that I mixed up the sentiment, not mixed up, but like mixed it up. Instead of using it as a BetterPressed plate, I went ahead and used it as a glimmer plate. So again, BetterPressed kit of the month and the standard die kit of the month. Okay, we're approaching the last card. Believe it or not, we're here. So I have a few more of the dies from the smaller or the standard die of the month, and I'm going to add in the adorable caboodle, like whole kit and caboodle die set every month if you order the caboodle. So that's every club kit in one discounted bundle. You get a cute little extra freebie. Sometimes it's a small stencil. Sometimes it coordinates with, the Glimmer Kit of the month or the Better Press. Sometimes they have extra Better Press plates. This month there is an adorable frog die, which I think is my favorite. It's my current favorite die ever. He just turns out so stinking cute. So here you can see, again, lots of scraps. I like to use my scraps up, so I did a ton of die cutting. And I did lots of purple in my frog, so I thought I would find some purple pattern paper. Now this purple doesn't match exactly to the purples that I have, but that's okay. It still turns out really adorable and cute. And I'm going to use one of my scallop label and tag dies to cut out the purple pattern paper. Say that 10 times fast. And I have my trick or treat sentiment. I have lots of pumpkins. I die cut the smaller pumpkin 3 times, but I'm going to walk through how I'm assembling anything that layers together. So I have my orange pumpkin, and I die cut out this kind of weird oval shape out of yellow so I could put that on the back side of my jack-o'-lantern. And I also cut out the stems of all the pumpkins out of this fun kind of brighter green cardstock. And so I'm going to add the stems to not only my jack-o'-lantern pumpkin, but all 3 of my smaller pumpkins as well. I'm layering my frog hat together, so I have the actual witch's hat and then the little kind of like band across the hat. There's this really fun crow. I love I love the crow's eye. It looks like it overheard you telling secrets and it's listening. I love it so much. I have my frog out of that same kind of bright green cardstock, but I gave it a purple tummy. I just felt very called to give him a purple tummy. And then I die cut the eye pieces. So the white is actually glued to the back of the frog's eye, and then this purple is glued in the openings from the die cut frog. I added his little hat to the top of his head, and I could have just left it like that. That frog is so stinking cute. It doesn't even need the witch's hat. It's so adorable on its own, but that witch's hat just makes me so happy. So now I'm going to work out my scene. I decided that I'm okay with the pumpkins kind of going off the edge a little bit to have the scene kind of escape the boundaries of this pattern paper. So once I know where I want my pumpkins to go, I'm going to use liquid adhesive to glue down the pumpkins that are a little further back. So that yellow pumpkin and the bright pink pumpkin, those are going to be just glued down with liquid adhesive. Once I have those in place, they were not staying. So I'm using my magnets. My glass board is magnetic, so those are going to hold those in place for just a bit. And then once I know that that glue is definitely secured down, I will grab my foam adhesive. I'm going to use two different thicknesses for this card. So for these pumpkins that I'm going to layer on top, I'm using my 1mm foam adhesive. So I'm adding it to the back of my pink pumpkin as well as my jack-o'-lantern, and I'll get those glued down in place. Now my little pumpkin stems also cut out these kind of the vines, these kind of vines, they are vines, vines and leaves as well. So I'm going to glue a couple of those down in between my pumpkins. My frog, I'm actually adhering with my 2mm foam. So it's a little bit thicker, so there's a little more dimension. He's a little closer than the pumpkins. I added that same 1mm foam adhesive to my raven and put him on top of one of the pumpkins. And then I'm going to use that same foam adhesive for my bats. I'm going to rearrange my bats in just a little bit, but that's where they are for now. And then my trick or treat sentiment, I adhered with the 2mm foam adhesive as well. I still had two of these little vines and leaves, so I'm going to glue those down and just kind of tuck them behind the frog and in front of my pumpkins. That will finish the majority of my panel, but then I remembered that I have a wax seal, and I figured since, when in Rome, we're doing wax seals, I wanted to do my Boo wax seal, which is a ghost, and I'm going to use my opal wax beads. So you can see I have kind of a funky piece of wax there, and that's because I was a leftover from a previous attempt at making wax seals. So I don't throw away the leftover from inside my spoon. I just, when it cools down, throw it in my bag of wax beads so I could just use it in the future. So as those wax beads are melting down a little bit, I will throw in that weird wonky piece to melt down with it as well. While I was waiting for my wax to melt, I realized that I wanted a little bit more on my background. So I used that same die that I cut my pattern paper panel, my purple pattern paper panel out of, and I die cut just a little bit of my black cardstock because I'm just going to adhere that to the back of my panel. So I didn't need it to be a full size panel. And I'm going to use it to center my card. So I don't want it to stick out too far. I want it to still look even on the top, bottom, and left and right of that panel. So I glued it so just a bit, maybe about a 1/4 inch of that black cardstock peeks out from the bottom, and it just kind of elevated it, I think. I really like how that turned out. I'm using more 1mm foam adhesive on the back of this shaped scalloped label panel, and I'll attach that to my card base. I actually had to get a second card base because it wasn't centered and I ripped it apart trying to get it off. So this is another card base. So I really like how this is turning out. Just like this, it's perfect, but we're going to add a little ghost to the card. So I'm making sure that my opal wax is melting, and once it's finally all melted, I'll go ahead and pour it onto my silicone pad again. And I'm going to add my Boo 3D wax seal on top. Now I didn't do as much wax. You will see that it won't go out around the whole oval edge, but that's okay because I'm going to do a little bit of surgery on this as well. I'm going to grab my scissors once it cools down. I had to walk away for a bit because I was all done with my card, but I was waiting for the wax seal to cool. And once I could lift it, you can see that fun ghost that is left on my opal wax. So I'm going to peel it off my silicone mat, make sure it's cool, and it's cooled down. I can touch it without, hurting or burning myself. I'm going to grab some sharp scissors and actually cut out this ghost. So I'm going to show you a little bit, but you also don't need to watch me cut wax. So I'm just going to go around and fussy cut that ghost out. And I know that's a lot of work. You definitely can skip this part if you're inspired by this card, but aren't about to fussy cut out a wax ghost. That's totally fine. I rearranged my bats a little bit so I had a little more room for my wax ghost. And then I'm so sorry I'm off camera here, but I'm using my liquid adhesive to add glue to the back of my ghost, and I'm attaching that to my card. So just one more fun little embellishment. It's kind of cool that I technically made it myself, but I really like how that little ghost looks on the card as well. Actually, I'm going to make another ghost impression since I have the opal wax out, and I'm just going to save it for a future card. So I'll go ahead and get that onto my silicone mat. I probably should have done one more bead. Again, it's not going to be the full wax seal, but that's okay. So while that is cooling, here is a final look at my last card. I think this is my favorite. I love that cutesy cartoon frog. I just think this card turned out so cute, and I love that raven or crow's face. It looks like it heard you telling some secrets. But here's one more final look at how all 4 of my cards turned out. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite, and if you are playing with your September Spellbinders kits as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!